Welcome to the Cannon Forder podcast, and I am pleased to say, finally, I have got Sheroy's voice, lawyer Sheroy, Sheroy's voice, the Gooniverse, AFTV. Do I have anything else I need to add to that, Sheroy, or is that
No, I think that's it. I think that's it. You're far too kind, far too kind. And you know what? For anyone watching, the delay in this happening is entirely down to me. The minute that I met Forder on James's channel, I thought, what an incredible bloke, what a lovely, knowledgeable, articulate bloke. I'd love to be on his channel. And since then, schedules haven't quite aligned, but I'm so glad we got to make it happen today. How are you, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm a little bit more prepared. I don't know if you remember last time. So for those who don't know, I had a text message from James saying, "Oh, could you come on the podcast?" And it was probably about 10 minutes before we were going live. I was out in the rain, walking my dog, came in, quickly dried my hair, sat down, had no idea what we were going to talk about. And as we're going live, my dog jumped up on my lap just to, make it even more difficult. So, yeah, a little bit more prepared, mate. Yeah,
I thought it was wonderful. You and the dog, mate.
Cheers.
I thought it was a great little cameo.
To be fair, do you know what? I've been thinking about doing little, just short videos, me and my dog, talk about football as I go for the walk. I thought, why not? So if anyone likes that kind of content, let me know in the comments, because I'm always walking the dog anyway, so I might as well do a video while I'm doing that.
Mate, next thing you know, it'll be you, Ben Foster, Ben White, their dogs walking along like they did, on the Ben Foster podcast. It'll be wonderful.
I will take that. I'll take that. So obviously, most kind of the big one at the moment is Nwaneri. We've had Preston recently. Nice little 3-0 win. Just talk me through how you thought the game played out, and actually how you felt about the lineup, because Arteta went reasonably strong for this. How did you feel at the time?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm 35 in March, as we were just discussing off air, right? So I came up with what was, the Carling Cup, the Capital One Cup, all the various names of it. And this is when Arsene Wenger basically used to put out GCSE students and sometimes people that ought to have been in sixth form. That's all I knew it as, until managers like Mourinho, managers like Guardiola came in and slightly changed the perception of it. And even at that sort of time, I wasn't too concerned, because in my mind, I thought, well, we're still accumulating FA Cups. We're still getting trophies that are seen as slightly more, or have slightly more prestige. That's all changed now. We've only had the one FA Cup since Arteta arrived, right? And I think that team selection was indicative of him perhaps realizing that he does need to get something over the line. And as well as we may have started in the Champions League, you look at the caliber of player at teams like Real Madrid and so forth, that's always a difficult one. So really you're looking at the domestic competition. So I was quite pleased with it, in all honesty. I know a lot of people that weren't, but I think it was a fantastic balance of people that would walk into a Premier League starting 11, people that rotate within our starting 11, and players that aren't really breaking into our starting 11. But that together ought to be exactly the sort of team that dispatches a mid-table championship team. And that's what it proved to be, mate. I mean, I don't know. What was your take when you saw the 11? Were you surprised? Did you want to go a bit weaker, or?
Well, let's have a little look at it. So here we are. So yeah, when I looked at the one for me was Jesus, that I was really surprised about, playing down the middle again. I think James was recently kind of quoted saying, quoting James B, look at the state of us.
Yeah.
Just about how he might be like one of our right wingers. Sterling on the left, maybe Trossard down the middle. I'm in agreement. I've said for a little while, I think Trossard for me in central zones is the big, that's his forte, so to speak. We'll probably go into that a little bit more later. But I was happy with it. I thought Pep has been the one who in recent times has kind of looked at this trophy as actually it's kind of the foundations to a season, so to speak. It's the one that kind of gains some confidence, gets you going, and winning mentality is something that, to be honest, Arteta came in, he had that amazing cup run, played a completely different brand of football, and it was really refreshing for me. I really appreciated it. And looking at this team, we even got, we've got players like Nwaneri coming in and gaining some minutes, Jorginho making a rare appearance and looking really good. Again, Mourinho getting extra minutes under his belt, and he seems to be kind of growing from strength to strength in a very, very short amount of time. So for me, it was a lovely kind of balance. It really was. Were there any kind of surprises for you? Because for me, it was Jesus. Anything that kind of sprung out to you straight away that you thought, "Ooh, I didn't expect that."
Timber. That was one. Look, when you're talking about Timber, I think it was before the Preston game. He said, look, he was too tired to finish against Liverpool. And I sat there, and me being me, not an athlete, when I'm tired, I need rest. But what I've very, very swiftly been informed by people that are athletes, well, actually, no, mate, you need to get him back up to sort of fighting fitness. So that's exactly why. But also, man, look, Calafiori's out. Okay, there was a concern about Ben White, and we've now, after the event, found out that he's probably not playing against Newcastle either. So the fullback positions are positions when it comes to players that we're confident in. We're quite light. Tomiyasu, Arteta has now confirmed that he's not going to be here before the international break. You're then looking at Lewis Skelly, very capable, very young. Zinchenko, look, he looked good going forward. We are a lot more vertical with him in an attacking sense, but we're also a lot more vertical with him in a defensive sense when he plays as well. So I thought we'd want to protect the fullbacks insofar as we could. Having said that, with hindsight, it's always wonderful, right? When the player does come off, gets the minutes, and they're not injured, you go, job well done, you've got the result. But had that gone wrong, I can't help but think that the amount of criticism that the manager would have got for playing Timber in that match would have been extraordinary.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's part of the reason Zinchenko was playing as well, because it seems at the moment like Lewis Skelly might have kind of leapfrogged him in the pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's something that he's looking at towards Newcastle, and having some assurance on the ball. Having said that, again, Zinchenko looked good. We know his downfalls, we know his flaws, but in this game, he was moving into midfield, he was retaining possession, he was doing all the things you kind of expect him to do. So, in all honesty, it was pretty assured performance. But there's one player I'm sure you want to kind of talk about straight away. Ethan Nwaneri was.
Oh,
I mean,
I
he
thought
is
you were going
just.
to talk about Tommy Setford. Ethan had a good game, did he?
He did. He did. I mean, for a player that's had, I believe, 27 minutes in the Premier League this season, people forget that. Now he has very, very few kind of experienced minutes. This wasn't an easy task to play a team from the Championship. They've been on a kind of downturn kind of currently. I think they're 16th in the Championship, but they've had similar circumstances to us, a couple of red cards as well. So even so, for Nwaneri to step in and play against a team like this, and to have a player like Jorginho next to him, I think that really was quite good for him. But yeah, he was just outstanding, wasn't he?
Incredible. I mean, it's difficult to dissect that performance without being met with, oh, but it's only Preston. But one thing that I've said since the game is, well, okay, it's only Preston, and his brace was only against Bolton. But with the greatest of respect, Raheem Sterling was also playing against only Preston, and Ethan looked better. Gabby Jesus was playing against only Preston. I think Gabby Jesus is maybe our second highest earner. Ethan looked better than him. I'd go as far to say that Ethan impacted the game more than Martinelli did. So the only Preston thing I think ought to be dispensed with, because you can only play the opposition that's in front of you, as cliche as it is. And he has outshone very experienced, hardened, trophy-winning players like Jesus and Sterling. And it's always indicative when the players around you aren't afraid to give you the ball in difficult situations, right? Because I remember when we did play, the 15, 16-year-old goalkeeper, bless him, I forget his name, against Bolton, but you could see that the defenders weren't giving him the ball as frequently, and they're trying to protect him because they knew. It's not like that when Ethan's in the team. They give him the ball and they say, go for it. And in fact, to Lewis Skelly's credit, they do the same there. Now, what is really, really striking is we talk about touch players, right? And that is often something that is cultivated over time, and they have that sort of air of class about them. His touch looks exquisite, particularly when he has two or three around him. And it's something that, given the way in which we've looked going forward in recent weeks, it is something that people have been crying out for in this team. And the fact that we didn't bring someone like that in the transfer window, and the fact that Arteta, in sort of summer press conferences were saying, well, we also do need to look within the academy. All of the messages were leading us to believe that a player of this caliber was going to be playing in the starting 11, right? And then when it didn't
100%.
happen, and things didn't go our way, I think all Ethan can continue to do is heap pressure on the manager, and my God, is he doing that?
Yeah, 100%. It's been really interesting, hasn't it, that we've had Emil leave, we've had Fabio kind of go on alone for what seems like is going to be a permanent
Yeah,
deal at the end of it.
yeah.
I'm sure that's what the club hopes anyway. And you're right, all kind of routes led to Nwaneri. And then suddenly we've had this complete formation change. I'm going to quote James again. How terrible is this? James asked Arteta, didn't he, about the idea about Timber playing as a centre back, whether that was just purely because of injury and his kind of rehab. But one of Arteta's biggest kind of indicators was that it was because he wanted that pod with Saka, Odegaard, and Ben White kept together. So for me, I kind of looked at it and thought, well, the easiest thing to do would be keep everyone the same, keep the system the same, and put in the kind of the closest profile that we have to Odegaard, which in turn would be Nwaneri. Instead, we've switched to this idea of almost like a 4-4-2 in some phases with Trossard, Havertz moving into the right zones. And I was going to actually bring this up. So if I have a little look here now, let's see if I can do it. So here's a little heat map for Nwaneri. So he was bringing up those positions. He's been playing on that right-hand side. He's been entering that zone 14. And he's been so assured on the ball. And if you look at Havertz, I'm hoping this is going to move to Havertz now. Again, that's Havertz heat map since Odegaard has left the team.
And that's
So
not where he's
it's
most effective, though, is it? That is not where he does his
exactly.
best work.
So it's really kind of obvious that Nwaneri is capable of picking up those zones, and we need to move Havertz into those kind of central areas. Liverpool was prime example. I think towards the end of the game, they realised that Konate can move out towards Martinelli, and they could vacate those spaces because we didn't really have anyone entering them. So for me, I think Nwaneri's kind of, you're right, he's asking all the questions of the manager now. I think all the questions have been about the player. Now it's the reverse. Can Nwaneri get into that team? Can Arteta actually accommodate him in that team? Because maybe accommodate's the wrong word. I don't think we need to accommodate him. I think we just need to have faith in him, possibly. But there lies the problem, because his age is one of the factors. His experience is one of the factors. And then there's a little guy called Leandro Trossard, who's in and out of favour with fans, I would say that. Where do you kind of lie on Trossard at the moment, and should he be in a team? Should he not? Where do you lie?
Look, Trossard has scored so many important goals for us in his short tenure here. I'm not one of those people that's just going to forget that. I'm not going to forget the Champions League goals that he scored that got us off the hook. I'm not going to forget the goal that he scored against Villa that ultimately sort of turns the game on its head on a day that it looked like we weren't going to score. I'm not going to forget the third that he scores against Liverpool last year at home to cement the result. And we then go on a run that gets us very, very close to the title. The guy has contributed, but we also can't shy away from the fact that the vast majority of his positive contributions do come from the bench. I do feel sorry for him in a way, because I've never actually thought that he's a natural left winger either.
Yeah.
I've always looked at him and said, well, in actual fact, do you have the pace to get in behind in the same way? I think you are probably better in central pockets. And if there was going to be a position where I thought he could really shine, it was going to be the one that he's occupying now. The problem that he has is he's now trying to fill the boots of arguably our best player.
Yeah.
Certainly our captain, certainly our best presser, certainly one of our players with the highest work rate, certainly a player that probably impacts defense and attack single-handedly more than anyone. So he's never quite going to be able to do that in the same way. I think he may have looked a little bit better had we not then had to change so much around him. If he still had Havertz playing in the sort of traditional 9 role, if Saka wasn't injured, if there weren't these concerns, then maybe he would have looked a bit better. But the issue is, memories are very short in football. when Trossard was coming off the bench and Martinelli didn't look that good and Trossard was scoring, everyone was like, you've got to get Trossard in the pitch. Like he's got to play for the full 90. Trossard plays for the full 90, doesn't quite cut it. Everyone says get someone else on, right? And you can see how ruthless certain sections of football fan bases are. I'm not saying I'm not passing judgment here. I'm the same very often. But that now goes into why Arteta is probably being so careful with Ethan, because of the way that you can be written off relatively quickly, because of the way that memories are short. I mean, I was alluding to this on the Gooniverse. There's a young player, but then there's a young player, mate, 17 years old. I had, just got my GCSE results, started my A levels. I knew nothing about what it took to be a man. I knew nothing about what it took to be mentally competitive. I wasn't fully physically developed. I was soft. There were so many things that I just didn't know about. 17 is young as hell. All right. And we very often say, yeah, but if you're good enough, you're old enough. And that may be right. And that has been right over the years. But I don't give Arteta too much stick for thinking that a Belgian international of the caliber of Leandro Trossard could have made the difference in that position. But now we have seen that he's not quite made the difference that we wanted him to. Is it time to take that risk and put the kid in?
Yeah, 100%. I think I was looking at Trossard's kind of as since Odegaard's kind of moved out of the team, looking at Trossard and how our results have kind of gone. And when you actually look at it, the games that he started, a win against Spurs, a draw against City. Obviously, he had the red card, which wasn't a great look. Another win against Leicester. We had the PSG. Bournemouth one is the one that kind of stuck out. However, again, he wasn't playing in the central zone in that game. He was moved to the left wing. So I do feel for the guy, because he's not kind of a left winger that suits the mold of our players. We lack transitional inevitability. Martinelli is that. He's not really like a left 8. He's not really a 9. And in terms of what we need when we play like through the press or over the press, I should say, Havertz does that job amazingly well. He's completely revolutionized what we knew Arsenal played like. So for Trossard, I just think he's this player who's kind of, he almost seems like a player that's missed his generation. He seems like he would have fit in really well a good like 10 or 15 years ago, but now he's kind of one of these players that isn't really any of our positions. He's not quite right for us.
This is exactly what people said about Kai Havertz, though. People said Kai Havertz would have been fantastic if you played 4-4-2, but you had a proper goal scorer in front of him. He could be the guy just behind, and he would have been brilliant. But what he did is he stepped up.
Yeah.
He stepped up to the point that now, he's in everyone's bloody fantasy team. He's one of the most expensive FPL strikers there is. He was going at a goal a game for 7 games, probably would have got 8 had Trossard not taken that penalty off him. And Trossard also, look, I've come at this from a relatively sympathetic angle with Trossard thus far, but don't forget, mate, he did come on against Villa, score that goal, and then walk to the corner flag like he was the dog's bollocks, right? And post-match, he did say, look, I want to play, and I think I've done what I need to play. So when you do get the chance, and you've seen your mate get sent off, a fortnight prior or whatever, why boot the ball when you're on a yellow already in one of the biggest games of the season? These sorts of decisions don't do him any favors either, right? He puts the pressure on himself.
Yeah.
And I don't think Havertz would have offered him that penalty. I think Trossard is the type of guy that probably would have taken it off him and said, look, I need to score here. And Havertz.
Oh, interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
Sheroy.
I don't think Havertz wanted to or would have offered it, you know what I mean? But Havertz seems like the kind of guy that if a teammate comes up to him and says, I want to take it, he'll give you the pen.
Yeah.
And it's these sorts of decisions that ultimately are now altering the perception. What better way to shut all the fans up that are giving you stick than to go and impact the game against Newcastle, for example, or go and get a brace against Chelsea and get us back to where we need to be before that international break.
Yeah. Do you think we could play with both Nwaneri and Odegaard? Do you think that is a possibility, or do you think that's kind of like almost like a pipe dream? We've seen it in the past. It kind of worked at City where they played De Bruyne and Silva, and they kind of played almost like hybrid 10-8s at times. Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think that's almost too much of an ask, and then that takes away maybe Odegaard's best qualities? Because although sometimes we don't see it in recent times in the final third play, there was points. He's got one of the highest open goal campaigns for a midfielder ever in the Premier League. I think sometimes we forget that. He's right up there in the terms of top 5 leagues and passes entering the box or chance creation. He's an unbelievably good creator, but sometimes he's asked to do so many different jobs, and he is the voice of Arteta. I think you can physically see what Arteta wants from his players just by watching Odegaard and how he plays game to game. And he does so many different things. Do you think we could play with both when Odegaard comes back? Or do you think that's just completely out of the question?
When you ask the question, you use the Man City comparison, right? What Man City are very, very good at is ensuring that when they've got all of those attacking options, you never know which combination they're going to play.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't. On any given day, back then it could have been exactly what you were saying, right? The silver KDB or whatever. Very similar now, but it's horses for courses. It depends on who your opponent is. The way that Arteta approaches every game is, I'm not going to have one rigid style week in, week out. I'm going to look at the weaknesses of my opponent and I'm going to try and ensure that we exploit them. I personally think that in a game where you're going to be up against two low blocks and they're probably just going to try and hit you on the counter, having maybe Odegaard in the 8 and Ethan occupying Odegaard's traditional position or the other way around would be brilliant for that, because you then got two relatively, I was going to say magic, but it's probably, it might be a stretch to call the kid magic, but he has looked it so far. But you then don't just have Odegaard drifting to the right and combining with Saka. They have to worry about Ethan on the left too. Yeah. Very often when Odegaard and Saka are playing, we say we're over-reliant on that flank. I don't think that would be the same if Ethan was occupying the left 8 in a game where we don't really have much coming back the other way. So yes, I could see it. But also, when you brought up Ethan's heat map, it was also indicative of the fact that he was occupying Saka positions every so often. So yeah. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Odegaard in his natural position, but maybe when Saka needs a rest, or God forbid Saka's injured again, Ethan can play on that right-hand side too, because he has shown that he's very apt at occupying that position too. We've all sort of said that he is the Odegaard replacement because that's the way the squad looks, but no one really knows what's going on in Arteta's head.
No. I would love to ask him about, what his plans are for the future, because he seems to always be 2 steps ahead of all of us. We've all been thinking, at one point, Jesus is coming out of the team. We're looking at profile of players. We're going, okay, we need like a typical gunman, you might say. Completely goes out of the blue. Havertz comes in, and we're all thinking, where has this come from? Where, I don't think there was anyone that really predicted Arteta doing that. And it's worked. Like, regardless of what your kind of feelings were when he first came in, his record speaks for itself right now. When he's playing in that role as a 9, he has been unbelievable for us. And he's given us so many different options. I think Calafiori coming in was another prime example of a left field target that has, I think, it has a little bit of a, what's the word? It's definitely showing that maybe Gabriel isn't as certain in that left centre-back slot as we all believe. I think Calafiori is a left-back, but I think it gives us so many different options. I've said it in the past about the buying game. That was a prime example of where we could have had a progressor like Calafiori in those central zones. But yeah, maybe we can. Maybe we can play Nwaneri out on the right. Maybe we can play him as a right-sided 8 with Odegaard, then getting different angles on the ball as well, because sometimes I do feel that maybe he's stifled with his left foot. But I mean, I say stifled. It sounds like he's a terrible player, but you know where I'm coming from. Like, I think it just opens up different avenues. It would be really, really interesting. Now, you just said about different ways of playing, so I'm going to bring this up a minute. So I've got this lovely little quote from a Scouse lad. He's called Jamie, and he's saying that Arteta's slowly morphing into Jose Mourinho type of manager. I don't know about you. I think maybe it's the blanket thing at the bottom, a Mourinho type of manager. For me, that didn't sit well. Um, I think maybe it just depends on how you look at these things, and when they're taken out of context, they could be, taken completely the wrong way. How did you feel about this? Because yeah, as I say, it didn't sit well with me, but
Yeah,
you might be a little
the
bit.
timing of it comes after weeks and weeks of Arsenal being spoken about as masters of the dark arts. It comes after Carra sitting next to someone like Roy Keane saying that we don't go for it enough. Even, I mean, Bournemouth, he was probably right, but they were saying the same against City when we were down to 10. It comes with Carra being best mates with Neville, who, when we went to the Etihad last year, said, "Oh, you had to go to the Etihad and win," when we didn't need to go to the Etihad and win. That draw was a perfectly fine result at that point in time. So even though Arteta himself was asked this question about this exact quote, and he said, "Well, Mourinho's won how many trophies, and he coached me when I was 15, so it would be a wonderful comparison, but I don't compare myself to anyone." He's taken it as a compliment, but I think you do need to understand the way in which it was delivered and what was trying to be said there. But my biggest frustration with this, I don't know if you agree, Ford, my biggest frustration is it makes it seem as though he only has one style of play, and it does him a disservice. That was the bit that I had a gripe with, because don't forget, back end of last season, 3, 4, 5, 6, we were scoring for fun. Now that isn't necessarily a Mourinho MO, is it? I mean, how many times have we played possession-based football where we suffocate teams like Pep? How many times have we had Martinelli, Saka, Odegaard, Jesus playing the Klopp style, where we just go, "Now we're going to outgun you. We might concede a few, but we're just going to." He's done all of that, and now he is having to adapt to not only the opponents that we had. By the way, let's not forget Tottenham away, Villa away, City away. I mean, even Brighton at home isn't the easiest game. Liverpool at home with an injury crisis. He's having to play with 10 men. Obviously, you're going to be slightly more pragmatic in a lot of those games and a lot of those situations. It's a lose-lose when you're Arteta. And I think, look, let me know if you agree, but I think one of the reasons why this is happening is when Arteta came in, the way in which he was very vocal about targeting referees after the Newcastle game, for example. Those sorts of things that he has done, I think he's put a bit of a target on his back, not just with referees, but also with members of the media. And we don't help as a fan base because we sit here and talk about it for hours.
Yeah.
But
So you're blaming us, Sheroy. Thanks for that.
well, in part, yeah. In part.
No, I do agree. I also think there was a little bit of the little bro kind of thing with Pep. I don't think a lot of mainstream media really believed in Arteta's ability. Then they looked at it and went, "Ooh, that's a bold move, getting someone in for the first." The first managerial job in a club as big as Arsenal that have just really had a downfall in terms of Arsene Wenger, who was a linchpin in our club, leaving, and then moving over to Emery, who was a decorated manager in terms of cups. But if you look at his kind of league history, he hasn't been incredible winning leagues. I will put a little caveat with that obviously he was up against, for a majority of his career, a Barcelona, a Real Madrid, and then at times an Atletico Madrid. So it wasn't particularly easy. But even so, for Arteta coming in, I think a lot of mainstream media looked at it and thought, wow, this will be a fun ride. Almost like Ange, he might play some nice ball and Arsenal won't really do anything. And then we got an 8th place finish. We got a couple more points the next season, and suddenly the next season where we're looking at, could we get top 4, suddenly Arsenal challenging. And I think that was a little bit of a kick in the teeth for some of those clubs and some of those pundits. I think George Graham said it at one point that Arsenal are supposed to be hated, and I think that's part of it. It's if people aren't talking about us and aren't saying bad things about the way we play or what our manager's doing, we're not doing something right.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree. It's interesting that you brought up Ange as well, because how often do we see Ange lose game after game after game, but these exact same pundits praise him for at least going out there and giving it a go? It's like, well, I'm a bit like, well, in actual fact, mate, if we did that, we'd get called naive. Arteta would get called too young, too inexperienced. Our players would be called kids. Our players would get stick for having not grown up and being scorned in 2 title races in a row and not developing. That's exactly what the narrative would be. Whereas it's not quite the narrative with someone like Ange, right? So anyone that says that this is an entirely impartial media that we look at, I mean, I'm sorry, it's not, but we are where we are.
No, I mean, the representation is really interesting in terms of pundits. Most of them are from kind of Liverpool, Manchester. We rarely have Arsenal, kind of ex-Arsenal players. There's a couple. I mean, Keown's sometimes on, Dixon. I mean,
Righty does a fair bit.
Righty. But in terms of like every single match day, you don't really see them, so we don't really get that view that in the same way that United and Liverpool kind of get, to be honest. And I think sometimes City, maybe kind of unconsciously, I think a lot of people kind of look at all of City's wins and they don't really hold them in the same regard to like a Man United, how they won title after title after title. I think when people look at City, I think there's this asterisk next to it. So maybe that's part of it as well. So I think a lot of ex-players sometimes look and go, who do I really want to win? Is it City or is it the team that I came up against and, I got torn apart by Henry, or I had to deal with Dennis Bergkamp day after day, or I had to bust up with Vieira, So I think sometimes, regardless of where it comes from, I think sometimes there is this kind of unconscious narrative against Arsenal. I won't say it's always against Arsenal. The red card recently against Saliba, it was a red card. I'm not making excuses for everything, but I think sometimes Arteta gets a bit of a rough rub of the green. But there we go. It is what it is. But we'll have a look at the next part then. So, Sheroy, Newcastle game. Is Arteta going to come out like Tony Pulis? Are we going to set up with, low block and banks of 4? And are we going to do that? Or do you see a little bit more expansive football for this game?
I think for the first 15 or 20 minutes, it probably will be that, because have you ever been up there?
I haven't. I
It is
really want to go.
One of the scariest grounds to be at as an away fan if they're up for it. And if the team gets on top, the fans do the same thing. And it's what Arteta very often calls the washing machine or the tumble dryer. You just can't stop it. You just cannot stop it at that point. So I think he's going to try and extinguish that and then build. I know it's boring. I know it's probably what a lot of your listeners don't want to hear, and it's probably what a lot of fans don't want to see. But if they get an early goal, that's when the game becomes really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So I think he's gonna try and be stable, particularly listening to his presser earlier about Ben White perhaps being injured. It means that you might be looking again at Partey at right back up against someone like Anthony Gordon if he's fit. That could be problematic. There are certain things that I think he is going to have to try and extinguish before we try and pose our own threat. But having said that, with Bukayo Saka back, with Kai Havertz hopefully occupying his natural position, with either Martinelli or Sterling or Jesus or whoever on the left, you probably have Marino and Rice in behind them. You've got an element of stability, you have an element of dynamism, you have an element of experience. My point here is all of the players that I've named around the Ødegaard position ought to be enough to maybe be able to take a punt on a wild card like Ethan in an ideal world. I don't think it will happen. And I think if it was going to happen, it would have happened in a far less intense game than this, which a lot of people are labeling as a must win.
Yep.
But if it were to happen, I would absolutely not be against it.
Yeah, I mean, this game now has kind of become, if we look at the last fixtures, it's become a bit of a cauldron for us. When we go there, there's an atmosphere, there's a bit of an edge to this game now. We all remember the kind of Bruno Guimaraes, sorry. Entirely difficult for me to say. Bruno, I'll go with Bruno. The Bruno forearm smash, the elbow that was taken, the ball over the line or from one angle, and Gary Neville taking about an hour to explain that it was in play. It's funny how he didn't do that against other clubs, but there we go. it is an interesting game, and I think there will be this huge narrative around it. Um, the press conference that Arteta did was really interesting because I felt that he tried to extinguish a lot of talk about this, and he tried to kind of play down a lot about Nwaneri. I think for this game, you're right. I don't think Nwaneri will come in for it simply because Arteta knows what type of game this could turn into. And I think he'll look at players with a bit more experience. And ironically, it probably will be Trossard in that kind of area, who is someone who got a red card recently for kicking the ball away. So, but seniority is something that he looks towards, doesn't he? I can remember. Do you remember we played a cup game and Cedric ended up playing last season? And it was a bit of a, where has this come from? But Arteta has that in his locker, and I think he'll kind of go with tried and trusted individuals. Maybe he'll look at Nwaneri and bring him on a bit later, have an impact on the game. We saw against Leicester, he had a huge impact. He's, in these cup games against Bolton and Preston, he's been unbelievable. But maybe it's not the right time to bring him in for this. What lineup would you go for, Sheroy, in terms of starting against Newcastle for this one?
I'm going to operate on the assumption that Ben White's not fit, and that Tomiyasu's not fit, and that Calafiori's not fit. I mean, I say assumption, but we pretty much know that's the case, right? So hopefully Gabriel's back. Sounds like he is. Gabriel Saliba in the middle. David Raya starting. Goes without saying. Left back, Timber. I think right back, Partey. A lot of people aren't going to like hearing me say that, but I think that's probably what's going to happen, particularly after the performance that he put in against Diaz last week. I know that a lot of people say, yeah, but is he going to do that again? But my point is, well, why not? He did. He looked pretty convincing in that position. And it then means you have a pretty solid central midfield of Mourinho and Rice. I'd have no complaints there. I would start Martinelli on the left. I would play Bukayo Saka on the right. I want Havertz back in his natural position, and I probably would go Trossard for the reasons that we have discussed. Look, this is the sort of game that a lot of people will say that the Bournemouth game was a must-win or whatever, but there comes a point with this Arsenal side under Arteta, whether it's in that FA Cup run, whether it's the second half of last season, where you're one result away from the world closing in on you. He has a knack. I think even the Chelsea game where he was probably about to lose his job and Smith Rowe steps up, it's just one of those results. This is one of those that I think if Arsenal don't win, I worry that not only will the fan base and its belief wane a fair bit, but I do worry that the players might be impacted by looking at the table as well, looking at what happened last year. And that's why I think exactly what you said. He probably goes for experience. And if that isn't working, well, people did want to justify that, yes, the squad is smaller, but it's higher quality. So hopefully those people were right. And impact players can do exactly what they're designed to do, make that impact.
Yeah, I mean, I hate talking about the squad. I really do, because I want to use the word thin, but not in terms of quality. In terms of numbers, we are one of the thinnest in the league. We really are. Which isn't it crazy that we kind of looked at it this summer and said, right, in our defense, we've got Skelly coming through. We've got Zinchenko, we've got Kivior, we've got Calafiori joining, Timber. I'm probably missing another left back here.
Tierney. We have Tierney.
Tierney. Then we've got Gabriel, Saliba, Tomiyasu, Ben White. Again, I've probably missed someone here. But we've got such a huge depth of quality as well as numbers. And here we are talking about Partey playing at right back. It's you can't legislate for it. You can't, and I don't think that is anything to do with the squad size. So to be fair to Arteta, there's nothing he could do about this. In terms of the team, I would go exactly the same as you. I don't see, which is really boring, isn't it? I should have just gone, so I'm going to play Martinelli up front. But I do. I think Lewis Skelly, it's too early for him to play as a left back in this game. And I would want Timber there. Timber's so assured on the ball. He seems like he's the worst player to play against if you want to get past him. If you want to put in early crosses and stuff, fine. But we've got a defence to deal with that. And Timber's just so good at one-on-one. He's unbelievable. He's been such a great buy. He really, really has. And then Partey has no reason to kind of lose that space there. I don't think we end up playing Lewis Skelly on the left and Timber on the right just to force Partey into the midfield when we've got Mourinho, who's done perfectly fine in that position at the moment. So Rice on the transition is great as well. So leaving him in the 6, I think, yeah, there's no real reason to change it. I wrote down here, though, so at the moment, Newcastle ranked 10th for their XG difference and 12th in goal difference. They've won 0 out of the last 5 games. So we should be going into this.
I made a face there because, look, they took a point off City when City went up there, and they have just beaten Chelsea. All right, and if you look at their front three of Isak, Gordon, and maybe Barnes, we all know that if that front three does click and we're not at it, we're going to be punished, right? So
I'm sorry, you read my mind, Sheroy.
Fine. Sorry. Should have let you finish.
No, I know. It's so right. Like, we should be going there with confidence to beat them. However, this what I was kind of linking it to is this Trossard thing of we need to make sure that we're not kind of overlooking them and thinking, oh, this is another game where we can just turn up and walk over them or get an easy like 1 or 2-0 win, because it's not going to be easy. It is going to be difficult. And I think the way that the game plays out, you alluded to it earlier about an early goal and the kind of the atmosphere around the game. I think if we play into their hands, it's going to be a long, long day, unfortunately. But yeah, in terms of what would you say in terms of how we need to play? Do we match them in terms of physicality? Do we try and just play possession ball, play it around them? How would you want to play it? Do we just kind of extinguish any fires before they kind of start, so to speak?
Look, their centre backs, you're looking at what? Dan Burn and Fabian Schär, I think, who are probably going to play in there. This is exactly the sort of game where a few intelligent runs and we could be in. You know, I think what we need to ensure is it's percentages and ratios for me. We may not get 30 chances like we did against Leicester or whatever it is, right? But I think we can fashion 4 or 5 high quality chances against them. Yeah. It's about making sure the right person's on the end to put them away, because I think defensively, if we're all at it, you know what, some people might be watching this after the match and I could have got this horribly wrong, so this could come back and bite me in the arse. But I think if we're at it, we shouldn't really be conceding more than 1 in this game. But I think with the attacking quality that we have on the pitch, I mean, let's not forget, man, we saw the caliber of goal that Saka scored against Liverpool, and we've seen him score absolute bullets time and time again. We've seen Havertz being an aerial threat. We've seen him being an absolutely nasty piece of work for centre-backs, but we've seen him with some high-quality finishes like the one to get us back in the game against Southampton. And even Trossard, you know, if there's one thing that Trossard can do, is finish. It might not be create, but it's certainly finish. And this is what I mean. It's just about being clinical in front of goal, because these away games, you don't get that many chances. Yeah. But against those centre-backs, you will create enough. You will create enough. It's just about how many you put away. I don't want this to be a game where I'm looking back saying, oh, but we sort of wasted 3 or 4 wonderful chances, and that's why I'm pissing and moaning about the referee decision that didn't give us the penalty or whatever, right? Because let's just take it out of the hands of the refs. Let's just do our job so that even if the ref gets something wrong, it doesn't cost us points.
It's so nice that I've actually sat down with you, talked about this, and we haven't talked about who's being on VAR and Michael Oliver, and because we all know where that kind of leads to. But I'm in complete agreement. They are an aggressive side, Newcastle, but usually after like the first phase, they kind of retreat and they sit back, and I think that could be really good for us. I wrote down here, play the team, not the occasion, because at the end of the day, if we play our game, and like you say, we play the averages, we work ourselves into like high XG situations, there's no reason that we can't win this game. I think it's really important that we have our best players close to goal, and we are playing in patterns of play that we're kind of really familiar with. And at the end of the day, we should be getting a win, and hopefully the next time I speak to you, we'll go, oh, we got that nailed, Sheroy. We had this perfect. So we'll wait and see. Before we kind of finish up, predictions, mate. What is your prediction for this game?
I'm always confident in our defence away from home, man. Even if we don't have our starting back four, I'm always confident. Obviously, Bournemouth sort of altered that slightly, but we were down to 10. I'm going to go. Do I think we're going to be really free flowing and clinical? You know what? I'm nervy 1-0 to the Arsenal. Nervy 1-0 to the Arsenal. I know it's not going to be a pleasant watch, but I'll take it.
Brilliant. I'm going to age even more. I think it will probably be a 1 or 2 goal difference. I reckon 2-1, simply because we're going up there. I don't think it's going to be as easy as going anywhere else, really. The one good thing is that we have gone, after this game, we've gone to pretty much the hardest grounds in the country. Let alone, I mean, maybe there's 2 more coming up at some point in the season, but on the whole, we have gone to some really difficult grounds. It'd be nice to actually go to some more pleasant places. But our record, we've conceded 1 against them each time we played against them recently. So I would presume we don't keep a clean sheet, unfortunately. And looking at the injuries, it's not exactly like we're playing with our best back four right now. So we'll see.
Yeah, but if it's Timber, Gabriel, Saliba, that is 3 of that back four, isn't it? And as I said, with Mourinho and Rice in front of them, maybe we could be quite secure and compact, man. Who knows?
Oh, I love that. Bit of positivity to finish this off, Sheroy.
Let's see.
Thank you so much, mate, for coming on. Because honestly, it's been a long time coming. But if anyone has not watched Sheroy on something, 1, I don't know how that's possible, because Sheroy's like doing a video every day on some channel. And 2, please go follow him. So go watch AFTV and look at that. Go watch the Gooniverse. I can't speak highly enough of you, mate, because getting me on that when I was on about 40 followers, 40 subscribers at the time, it just shows the kind of guys that you and James really are. Like, it really does speak volumes about you guys. And go to Sheroy's Voice. Go follow that channel, because I'm loving it. The fact that you're able to kind of sit there and chat for that long and kind of break things down in such an articulate way, it's amazing, mate. It really is. It's I love your channel, genuinely do.
I really appreciate it, man. You're far too kind, and all this stuff about getting you on when you had whatever it was in terms of followers or subscribers. Honestly, I've always been a big advocate for none of that stuff matters, mate. You love Arsenal. You're a true gent, and that's why I wanted to appear on your channel since the minute you floated the idea, mate. Because you're a really good guy, really articulate yourself. And thank you for all the kind words about my channel. But I'm looking at this setup you've got here. For anyone that's wondering, I can see a bit of the behind the scenes stuff, and it's just making me realize how much I need to level up.
Mate, you should see it when I do my thumbnails. It's pure chaos. Those of you that do subscribe to my channels will know. But at some point, Sheroy, I will do one of you guys of the Gooniverse, and I'll send it across. You won't want to put it up because it'll be something bonkers. I think that the most recent one, what did I do? Oh, I had Rohan as Nwaneri. Then I had the boys on horseback.
Oh, wow. The horseback one I saw that.
Did you?
I saw that.
Yeah, so they are a little bit odd, but I'll do one at some point of you guys on your own little Gooniverse. So,
wonderful.
Yeah,
I look forward to it. That's the real badge of honor. When Forder gives you a bespoke thumbnail, that's when you know you made it.
I'll catch you guys soon. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Forder podcast, and I will catch you next week. Cheers.